great to be here again, 3 years after we actually launched this event with AfricArena in 2023. And wow, how much this space has changed in just the course of 3 years. So I'm Maelis, I'm the founder and managing partner of the Catalyst Fund. We are an early stage VC fund and venture builder investing for a climate resilience future in Africa. We have deployed actually a lot of capital already to some of the shoutouts that the prior panel gave us, to 25 companies, but we need to do a lot more investments in the years to come. So founders in the room, definitely come to talk to me after today. So, what a year 2025 has been. It's been a year where we've had, again, stark reminders of the cost of climate inaction. $250 billion losses from wildfires in California, to the deadly floods in Spain, to heat waves across Europe and Asia, and Africa was not spared. Here, we also had devastating floods because of El Nino events in Kenya and Tanzania. We had several cyclones that really affected Eastern and Western Africa. So these are no longer events that happen once in a century, once in a decade. They're really part of our new reality. Not to mention the subtle ways in which climate change is affecting our livelihoods, the way people earn income, our jobs, across all sectors of the economy. But this vulnerability also presents one of the biggest opportunities of our time. According to the BCG, so I didn't say it, the experts did, the global market for climate adaptation and resilience alone is projected to grow to over $1 trillion from 2025 onwards. And if we look at the decarbonization market, that's actually projected to grow $4 trillion between now and 2030. So this is a staggering opportunity, and I do believe that Africa can be a leader. Many others have said this before, in building the solutions, not just for Africa, but also for the world. So I was asked to come here and give a bit of a state of the climate venture ecosystem up to now, with the most recent data. So I've decided to wear my co-founder and partner in the Catalyst Fund, Maxime, that you all know, runs Africa the Big Deal, and I geeked out for several hours on the data set to give you a little bit of good news and also nuance on where we're at. So let's start with the good news. First, billions are flowing in, right? We know that CPI, the Climate Policy Initiative, studies the whole flows, private and public, that go to climate finance in Africa. And we've seen that has increased 48% between 2019 and 2022. There's actually even more recent data that shows an increase. But put into context, this remains only 4% of global climate finance, which is still humbling. The private sector has shown up, which I think is great, and provides more diversity. So when we look at the climate tech ecosystem, in spite of, as we know, a sharp decline, like after 2021 in particular, in overall VC funding for Africa, climate tech has remained a bright spot. In fact, for the past 2 years, we had at least 1/3 of overall VC funding going to companies in climate tech in Africa. And this year, in 2025, year to date, we're already at 800 million, which is actually 35% of overall climate finance. And if you look at the deal count, 480 climate tech companies have raised at least 100K in the past 6 years, which is a huge number. It's a huge increase. And that's super exciting. But where is this money actually going? Because the story is more nuanced. If we look at volumes of funding, energy absolutely crushes it. So it dominates. 87% of 2025 climate tech funding has gone to solar energy. And consistently, this has been the trend actually since 2019. In 2025, agriculture only captured 3.4% or so of the total funding volume. And if we look, though, at the deal count, the story is a bit different. We see that agri rules the hustle, agri and mobility, actually. So by deal count, we see that energy and water is still the biggest, roughly 37%. But then food and agriculture is catching up, nearly 30%, and then logistic and transport is close behind at 20%. So investors in the room, I think this is actually a reason to rejoice because the pipeline is getting more diverse, there are more opportunities, and we can look beyond what we, several years ago thought of as a climate tech opportunity. Now, if we look at instruments, in 2025, debt dominated, so 72% of climate tech capital in Africa came in the form of debt, mostly for large-scale energy projects, and 45% is true for the period 2019 to 2025. Equity rounds, though, make up most of the deal counts. So there's definitely a lot of activity when it comes to VC equity investments. And we also see a lot of grants at the early stage. It's actually 28% of the transactions at the early stage are grants. And this shows how important the non-dilutive capital also is. When you're doing a lot of R&D, when you're building something very innovative, there's a lot of power in that, which is why programs like SACE are so important. But then we also have to think about what comes after, right? To Melanie's point, we can't have these drop-off points that leave a lot of companies when they look for the next stage of funding high and dry. How do we think about that whole continuum as one? When we look at stage, we also have seen that there's been a rise in Series B and C funding since 2021, but pre-seed activity has peaked in 2023 and then declined. So if we don't fund the early stages, right, whether it's grants or debt or equity, doesn't matter, but if we don't find it, tomorrow's pipeline won't exist. So for the growth stage investors in this room, it's important to consider this, and I think there could be even more relationships, right, between growth stage funds, early stage funds, via allocations like fund of fund investments that could tighten this ecosystem further. And also, reality is that capital remains way too concentrated. Across the period, 70% of all the climate tech capital has gone to 20 companies. 20. You can see the list of these amazing companies, by the way, but they're all here on the screen. And if we look at 2025, the concentration is even more extreme. 3 companies, Sun King to be precise, Burn, and d.light, have captured 70% of all the climate tech funding in Africa in 2025. Even though, if you look at the full list, there's more diversity. So we are seeing other types, right, of companies also capturing the interest of investors and raising large amounts. This, though, is way too little, right? We're not going to change the landscape of innovation with 20 companies alone. We need a lot more diversity. And then maybe another sobering stat is that there's still far too few exits. Overall, for the period 2019 to today, only 14 exits have been recorded, and they're primarily in the energy sector. So I do believe, I'm very optimistic this will change in the next decade, and we need this to change if we also want to attract more capital and more enthusiasm to this space. So where does this leave us today? 2 things. One, there's no shortage of innovation in the climate tech space, right? 480 companies that need your capital if you're an investor in this room. This should be very exciting. And the entrepreneurs continue to build, continue to come to this space with new ideas. But the funding journey is broken. There's holes, right? There's holes across. We know that maybe after the initial grants or very pre-seed checks, there's a dip or a miss in middle. We know that debt remains too expensive. Like in some markets, 15% is a good deal, right? And then we know that local capital markets, as many others in the panel before have said, are missing in action. Where are the pension funds, the local family office, the local angels that could also participate in climate innovation, and they're not quite there yet. So you know that in a few months, the climate leaders are meeting in Belém, in Brazil, for COP30, which is a bit of a moment, right, for climate action. And where does this leave us, right, as African innovators and as African investors in the climate space? Number one, I think we need to rewrite our own playbook. I don't think we need just unicorns. There's companies that are going to reach 20, 30 million in revenue and are going to reinvest that through customer payments, working capital lines, blended finance, and those are going to be a key part of the story, actually, of climate innovation on the continent. So what capital matches they need? How do we finance those? And those can generate very, very attractive returns for LPs as well that come into funds. We also need to unlock domestic capital. I feel like this has been a refrain, but there's $2.4 trillion, right, in pension funds, family offices, corporate VC in Africa alone. Just a fraction of that can really change the landscape. So how do we attract that? How do we build fit-for-purpose investment vehicles with the right risk-return profile to move this money, right, to make sure that maybe blended finance is used not as a buzzword, but as a true mean to unlock this capital, which so far is being a little shy. And also, we must broaden the ecosystem, right? And we need to tell the real stories of impact, not just funding rounds, but real stories of what's happening, because the entrepreneurs are here. So this is why I think events like today are so important. And I want to hear a big shout from all the entrepreneurs in this room. Make yourself heard. There you go. Excellent. And another big shout from all the investors in this room. Yes, thank you. What about the capital allocators? The LPs that invest in funds? Ooh, silence. Okay, AfricArena, you have to do a better job next year, okay? Because there's clearly a missing player in the room. But please, entrepreneurs, speak to at least 3 investors today. Investors, keep an open mind. Not everything is going to look like the usual playbook, and there will be asset-heavy solutions. We need to get comfortable with that. And ecosystem builders, try to be creative about how we overcome some of the gaps that I've talked about today. Because all of us have a role to play in making Africa climate ecosystem the most vibrant yet. Thank you. I don't think we have enough accurate data, actually. That's something that the data set doesn't capture. There's estimates. I have some ranges in mind, which we can take aside, but no authoritative data, which actually is an issue. I think we should all be more transparent about the outcomes of some of these exits so we can compare and contrast across sectors and see how it's improving over time.
Yeah, because I think that's why a lot of private or local investors are not coming in. If they don't know what kind of returns they can get, it looks still like a public sector type of job for them.
True. True. But I know it's attractive. Like speaking to some of the funds that have been part of these exits, it's not, it's attractive.
Hello, thank you for the interesting data. I've noticed some of the deal size for agri sector is a lot more smaller than energy sector, for example. What are some of the main reasons for that? And then do you think that trend would change over time? Thank you.
I hope it will change over time, because agriculture is a very important sector for many African countries. In some cases, 60% of GDP comes from agriculture. But there's a few reasons. I think one is that we are now seeing more innovation happening in the climate space in agriculture, from precision agriculture solutions or data solutions that use satellite-led data, or again sensors on the ground, to value chain solutions that digitize the connections between farmers and off-takers, for instance, like farm to feed here in Kenya. But it's more recent, whereas energy innovation and funding for the energy sector has been more established, for more than a decade now. And so that's one reason, we are at the earlier stage of that curve. Second reason is that a lot of investors, I think, feel the agriculture sector is not going to deliver as much return. and maybe isn't as attractive, right? Especially from a venture return expectation perspective. And therefore, there's more hesitance in going and investing. So you have different kind of profiles of funds who have dispersed a lot in the space, SME funds or impact funds. But again, the capital remains fewer, right, than what has gone to the energy space, especially infrastructure initiatives. So those are two explanations. There's more to the story, obviously, but I'm now seeing that this trend is shifting somewhat. Even ourselves in our portfolio, 60% of our pre-seed deals are now in the food and ag space. So there's at least vibrancy in terms of new
That's
ideas.
Great, yeah. Thank you so much.
Yes. One? Oh, last one.
Hello. Both you and Melanie brought up the topic of local capital investing in the climate space. And one of the things that, when I saw that, it made me think to a topic that a lot of Kenyan economists are talking about, which is how to channel undeclared wealth into productive parts of the economy. And so I wanted to know whether that is something that is purely an avenue that the government has to deal with, or if there are ways for DFIs and for LPs and GPs to think about ways to make undeclared wealth, channel it towards useful parts of the economy.
Right. So you're saying undeclared wealth from high net worth individuals? Okay. Yeah, there could be, as long as I think high net worth individual, whether they have a family office or want to invest alone, sees a clear benefit, right, and a clear return potential or impact potential, alignment with what they want to do with their money. And there are some actors that are doing this on a global scale, like organizations that bring together people with families, with wealth, to talk about these issues. How do you channel this money to productive uses or to impact in ways that will fulfill your own goals? There should be more, and I think it's definitely a space that needs to grow in Africa, on the continent. Most of these organizations, high net worth individuals and family office networks, are active in Europe, in the US, in Asia, in Latam even, much less so here on the continent. So that's a great idea. I'm happy to share notes on what we could do. I think, unfortunately, I needed to take the last one. So thank you again. It's been a pleasure, and have a great conference.